Hey, that was pretty loud. What's poppin'? This is Will, and I will be your guide through the SOSI section of AcDec this year. So with this video, this section is quite diverse and covers an absurdly large stretch of time. So this video will be broken into multiple parts. So this is gonna be part one. This is gonna cover around the first 20 something pages. The videos won't be very long, so they'll just be easy to just take and go, so you don't have to like focus for long periods of time. Because I hate doing that. I did this set of notes over like a month because I couldn't be bothered. So the full collection of notes that I took over the said month will be in the description of the video. So let's get to it. So the introduction doesn't really contain that much. It's not really important. Most sections it's not important except for like I'm assuming the mathematics ones. I haven't read it yet. I'm not that far ahead. So aside from the paradox of value, there's nothing really important. So the paradox of value is pretty cool. I like it. It states that scarcity is what drives monetary value as opposed to actual use or worth. And they used an example of diamonds and water. So diamonds aren't necessarily inherently valuable. So if you're thinking about it like in terms of use, diamonds serve like no use unless you're playing Minecraft. But they're really scarce, or there's a false scarcity that has been developed. So they have a lot of value. But water is very abundant, despite its like high intrinsic value of like, hey, we kind of die without it. It's just not worth much. You can go down to Kroger, grab a water bottle. They'll charge you $4 for it, but like that's just Kroger prices. So aside from that, there's nothing really notable in the introduction. And aside from one other thing that may be on the test, which is the chemical makeup of water. So it discusses all three states of its chemical makeup, mainly water and ice, but kind of like offhandedly mentions properties of gas. So it begins with the water cycle, which I hope we are familiar with, but who knows? I didn't pay attention in seventh grade science, so who am I to say? So it also discusses water's high heat capacity and heat of vaporization, and those are due to its tight covalent bonds between the oxygen and helium atoms. And it also discusses why ice floats on water, and it's due to ice having a tetrahedral structure and water has a hexagonal crystalline structure, which is more dense than ice. So that has like a very big impact on currents. And if ice didn't float, who knows? You might be dead. At least that's what the SOSI section says. If only. So its polarity, its high polarity also helps in how fast it can erode land. And it also helps in its ability to create compounds with salt, which is why the ocean is so salty. Instead of all the salt just going to the bottom like other liquids, it's thoroughly like in there. The science. This is in the science section. But among scientists, it's also a popular belief that water itself is biophilic, which is to say that life can only exist around water and actually spawns from water. So without water, there is no life. So getting on from the introduction, we're now going into the first section, which I believe is like, or the second section, I think, and it's like 50 pages or so. So I'm not going to be able to cover all of this in this video. I'm going to get up to around the Neolithic Revolution. Just picture Miss Hardy screaming that if you want the full effect. So water and humanity have always been joined at the hip ever since humans developed like a couple 100,000 years ago. So societies and cultures have always been based around water and its whims ever since nomadic cultures began around 200,000 years ago, which is when the Homo sapiens species developed. So nomadic societies would migrate to areas with plentiful plants and animals, which were for obviously around water, such as like lakes and rivers, and I guess the ocean. But the ocean didn't host like a lot of wildlife. It hosted mainly fish, so maybe fish swim. So eventually, with the Neolithic Revolution, humans began to settle along rivers and lakes more permanently, which led to a sedentary lifestyle. But and that was in order to domesticate their plants. But other nomadic cultures, like later on after the Neolithic Revolution, such as the Mongols, who were a pastoral culture, they thrived on the steppes due to their nomadicism because there isn't like a lot of water up there. So when Asia entered a pluvial period, which means tons of rainfall, tons of water, bountiful, they were able to take full advantage because their numbers were able to multiply so quickly, and they were able to rapidly just become a superpower throughout all of Asia. I mean, we know what they did. They took over like half the world. They poured silver down some greedy dude's throat. That was pretty cool. And they were able to take advantage of the situation, just dominate most of the world, one of the largest empires in history. So other nomadic groups that were before the Neolithic Revolution and afterwards, because some of them still exist today, would be the Baodins, the Maasai group, and Native Americans. So the Baodins were a nomadic group in the Sahara. That's oases. Is that the oases? Or that's oases, or water sources as universal and communal rather than as something that can be harvested or exploited. So to this day, they still enforce the protection of any oases that they may visit or use. So they had rules like you can't chop down trees, you can't hunt something that lived around there to extinction. You have to allow other groups to use them as well. So to this day, they are still quite whatever you want to call it. They are still quite a nomadic culture that thrives off of the back of this. And but modern governments are trying to sedentarize them. So in the modern day, they have resulted to much more illegal forms of nomadism, which is to say that they would like smuggle stuff across borders, and they use the stars to find paths between oases, which I thought was cool. So continuing on with that, in sub-Saharan Africa, so that wasn't the Sahara, this is sub-Saharan, the Maasai group practiced transhumance, and they saw animals as a resource to be expanded when there was plenty of rain in a pluvial period and expended in times of little rainfall like a drought. And they were very similar to Native Americans in the sense that they would harvest an area, head elsewhere, and allow it to regrow properly in their absence instead of just like constantly exploiting an area until there was nothing. They just allowed it to grow. So that's going to cover everything up to the Neolithic Revolution. That is most of the important stuff about nomadic groups. From here, it will quickly go into the first instances of the Neolithic Revolution, and it will cover all of the developments that follow it. So in this video, we covered the introduction, which would be the science of how water works and ice and similar stuff like that, and the paradox of value, and also nomadic cultures and how they thrive based around water, and how plants and animals shaped how they traverse the area due to water. So now that would cover a little bit of section 2 and all of section 1 in the SOSI section. Thanks for watching, and just study more. Like, come on, you have to go to Highland Park. Nothing else to it. Let's go.